I knew something was off the second I saw my ID badge sitting on the edge of my keyboard like a threat, not hanging from its usual hook, not clipped to my desk lamp where I always left it, just there, centered, waiting. That's not something you just miss. My name is Emily, Treasury Operations, 3 years deep. I don't make noise, I don't play politics, I just keep the wires moving, the cash positioned, the company liquid. Every single vendor release, payroll run, tax event, sweep, they all start with me. Or more specifically, my credential. My clearance isn't just internal, it's legal, it's embedded. It's the invisible skeleton that holds the entire liquidity system upright. That morning, same as always, I was early. I got in before the espresso machine stopped screaming and before anyone in HR remembered they had feelings. Logged in, ran the reserve float validation, checked the auto transfer preps, and ran the reconciliation script I coded myself, because IT's version was a drunk python eating its own tail. Everything looked tight. The usual daily friction, sloppy routing on a French vendor, someone fat-fingering a supplier amount. I fixed it all before 8:45. I even pre-cleared the quarterly sweep, just in case the CFO wanted to pull an early release to calm the Series C group chat. I left nothing dangling, no alarms, no gaps, just a system humming under the weight of 12.6 mim in outbound velocity, all moving like it always did, because I kept it doing so. By the way, before I go on, if you've made it this far, do us a small favor. Tap that subscribe button and like the video. 97% of you listen without subscribing, and every tap keeps this madness going and helps the team bring you more chaos from the trenches. All right, back to it. By 9:06 a.m., I had double-checked every custodial ledger tag and queued the core vendor batch. My credential confirmed. Pre-sign was valid. Risk thresholds cleared. I was wrapping up with my second coffee when I saw him through the glass wall. Matt, the new VP of People, or as I call him, HR's pet frat bro in a Patagonia vest. He wasn't talking. He was pointing directly at my desk. I didn't flinch. I've dealt with his kind before. Smiles like currency, charm like a virus, arrogance thick enough to float. He sauntered by my desk 20 minutes later with that fake laugh swagger and said, "Big day, Emily." I didn't respond, just nodded once and kept scrolling through my reconciliation buffer. He leaned closer and whispered, "Make sure everything's tidy. Some folks are watching now." Now, you might think I'm paranoid, but I grew up in operations. We don't assume anything without receipts. And Matt? Matt wasn't the type to waste words unless he was trying to flex. So I checked the internal HR feed. Nothing obvious. But then I passed by the break room on my way to the archive printer and saw it. My photo, pinned to HR's corkboard with a bright red post-it above it, handwritten in that same frat boy Sharpie swagger. Needs a lesson. Just floating there between a flyer for flu shots and an out-of-date birthday calendar. Like I was some intern who broke the coffee machine, not the woman who literally kept the company's liquidity protocols from imploding. I stared at it for about 3 seconds. Not in anger, not in fear, just calculation. They'd made their move, so I made mine. I walked back to my desk, calmly opened the Treasury portal, and without blinking, started the process. Disabled auto-sign triggers, revoked temporary routing approvals, paused the sweep queue, and then the kill switch. Flipped my credential to read-only and signed out. I closed every app, encrypted my compliance notes into an archive vault, and sent one email to the CFO with the subject line, "Access logs for custodian transition." No body text, no signature, just the attached audit file. I dropped my badge into an envelope, slid it into her inbox, and walked out without a single goodbye. Not angry, not bitter, just done. And somewhere in the building, the machine started to shudder. They just didn't know it yet. The first time Matt cut me off in a meeting, I let it slide. Not because I'm passive, but because I've seen men like him come and go like fast fashion. Loud, overconfident, and somehow always promoted before the inks dry on their contracts. It was a Thursday. Cross-departmental sync. Me, CFO, legal, product, HR. I was walking through the updated disbursement controls for the vendor migration. Tightened thresholds, dual sign-off embedded in the ledger, new compliance routing for international wires. You know, grown-up infrastructure. Matt jumped in before I finished my sentence. Wait, sorry, he said, flashing that grin he probably learned at a Sigma chai mixer. Did you say manual routing logic, like with folders and stuff? The room chuckled, softly, like people afraid to pick sides. I kept talking. It's a ledger-based validation, not folders. The process ensures. He waved a hand. Emily, we're a tech company. This sounds like something you'd do at a bank in 1998. I felt the CFO shift next to me. She knew the system I built was the reason our last audit passed without a single note. But she didn't say anything, and neither did I. Just stared at him, not blinking, memorizing the exact way his lips curled when he thought he'd scored points in a room that didn't know better. Later that day, I needed to pull a backup credential report from HR. Standard thing. I passed through their shared space. Open floor, fake plants, team photos like it was summer camp, and that's when I saw it. My headshot. Printed in black and white, pinned dead center on the corkboard. Red Sharpie, all caps. Needs a lesson. Underneath, someone had drawn a little smiley face with X's for eyes. Real subtle. Just enough to look like a joke if called out, but everyone knew what it was. A public branding. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds, just long enough to feel the blood roar through my ears and then vanish again into that place where rage goes when it's too quiet to scream. I didn't rip it down. I didn't storm into Matt's office. I didn't send an email. I didn't even take a photo. What I did was walk back to my desk, sit down, and start writing the internal kill order for my own access. If they wanted to play games, they could do it without the person who kept their financial lungs breathing. It wasn't the first time a smug little king tried to humiliate me for the crime of knowing too much and smiling too little. But it was the first time I let them dig the hole themselves. Because what Matt didn't understand, what none of them ever do, is that in Treasury Ops, authority isn't loud. It's quiet. It's systemic. And once it's gone, no amount of flailing fixes it. So I spent the rest of that afternoon doing what I do best, setting up the right levers for the fall, unhooking myself, quietly, from every disbursement trigger, setting compliance flags to gray, locking audit trails with hashes that only I could reverse. A dozen tiny threads, invisible to everyone else. But if you pulled even one the wrong way, the entire liquidity system would seize like a rusted engine. Matt could have just said thank you in that meeting, could have nodded and moved on. Instead, he gave me a target. And I don't miss. The final straw wasn't the corkboard. It wasn't Matt's smug smirk as he walked past my desk later that afternoon, tossing me a finger gun and saying, "All in good fun, right, Em?" It wasn't even the passive-aggressive email from HR that hit my inbox at 5:17 p.m. with the subject line Performance Culture Alignment, asking me to swing by for a quick feedback sync. It was the spreadsheet. The one I opened for the 1,000th time, the daily liquidity master, the one nobody else really understood. It lived in a private vault folder, linked to 3 separate compliance flags and 4 alert triggers. I stared at it for a long time that evening, not checking values, not reconciling, just looking. And then I did something I'd never done. I closed it. Not saved, not sent, just closed. I shut down the terminal, logged out of the internal portal, and opened the Treasury suite one last time. I walked through every scheduled wire, flagged every outbound vendor push, paused the auto sweep queue, and disabled the overnight float validation. A few clicks here, a few toggles there, nothing loud, just precise. I rerouted my credential to read only, not revoked, not deleted, just frozen, an elegant little deadlock that would keep the system humming until it needed my fingerprint, and when it reached for me, it'd find silence. Then I pulled the final trigger, set the outbound cash reconciliation batch to needs custodian authorization, a box only I could tick, not the CFO, not finance, not even IT. Me, the named custodian. Written into policy, written by me, enforced by systems I designed because no one else ever cared to. HR pinged me again as I was zipping my laptop into my bag. "Hi, Emily. Just following up on our earlier note, would love to chat tomorrow." I didn't reply. Instead, I reached into my drawer and took out my badge. That cheap laminated rectangle with the peeling corner and the barcode that had become muscle memory. I stared at it, then slipped it into a plain white envelope and scrawled one word across the front in black pen. For Marcy, the CFO. Because she was the only one in that building who'd ever understood what I did, who'd actually listened when I explained why I'd built it the way I had. She trusted me because she had to, and maybe because she knew that while the VPs made noise, I made function. I walked the envelope to her glass-walled office. Lights off. She'd left early, probably to prep for the investor call tomorrow. Poor thing didn't know her entire cash cert tree would be blank by sunrise. I slid the envelope through the mail slot in her door. No note, no final warning, no goodbye. And then I walked out. Not a soul looked up. Not from product, not from legal, not even the intern who'd been shadowing me all week and still couldn't pronounce ACH without stuttering. I didn't need them to, because I wasn't walking out empty-handed. I was walking out holding the one thing no one in that building could buy, replace, or fake. Trust embedded in the bloodstream of the system. When I stepped into the elevator, I didn't feel victory. I felt clarity. The kind that comes when you know the game's already over and the other side hasn't realized they lost. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't need to. The silence would do it for me. Matt came back from lunch like he'd just closed a funding round himself. Aviators tucked in his collar, voice raised just enough to make sure people heard him say something about scaling culture and firing with intent. He paused by the espresso machine, made some cringe-worthy joke to the marketing girl half his age, and strutted back to his desk like the second act of a sitcom no one asked for. Then the pinging started. Not his Slack, finance. From across the floor, I imagine it began small. A single analyst, Sherry, probably, looking confused at a bounced confirmation notice. She would have double-checked the payment ID, refreshed the portal, re-downloaded the remittance stub. Still red, still flagged, then 2 more flags, then 4. By 1:17 p.m., someone from AP was standing up, looking around saying, is anyone else getting the authorization required error? Matt, back at his desk, didn't even look up. A junior controller walked over to his desk. Hey, Matt, do you know if Emily's out today? He didn't miss a beat. Probably at yoga or something. Why? The controller hesitated. Because her cert's not showing. The liquidity dashboard won't load past batch 2, and the wire queue's failing checks. Matt spun in his chair like a discount Bond villain. What does that even mean? It means nothing's clearing, the controller said slowly. No cash movement. Vendor wires are bouncing. The cert ledger is empty. Matt scoffed, stood, clapped his hands once like that would fix things. Okay, let's not freak out over a dashboard refresh. It'll sort it. Another analyst piped up, nervous, younger guy. It's not IT, sir. This is on the treasury side. Emily's credential was the disbursement anchor. Matt blinked like someone had just started speaking Greek. The what now? The disbursement anchor, the analyst repeated. It's the policy lock-in on the float certification and batch trigger system. Without her credential, the wires can't move. Legally. Matt shook his head, smirking. Jesus, you people and your acronyms, just override it. Silence. And then, we can't. That was when the air shifted. Not panic, not yet, but that eerie static that settles when smart people realize they're not in control of the thing they thought they were. Matt tried again. Can't we just reroute it to another approver? The controller's voice was flat now. She was the only named custodian on the account. Treasury policy binds disbursement to that credential. Her signature key isn't just an ID, it's a compliance flag. The system won't recognize any other credential unless she transfers it manually. She quit? Matt laughed, still waving it all off. She just walked out? Are you kidding? No one laughed with him. Another window popped up on the shared finance screen. Daily liquidity cert. Missing. Awaiting primary custodian. Someone from legal poked their head in. Hey, why did we get a compliance alert from Coastal Trust? They're flagging our vendor disbursements as unauthorized. Matt turned a little pale, but still, the smirk stayed, like it was glued on. All right, everyone, relax, he said. This is fixable. I'll ping Marcy, we'll loop in IT, get someone to proxy the approval. Probably just a permission thing. Sherry raised her hand, eyes still on her screen. Matt, the system just triggered a warning. Custodial verification expired. Human override not permitted. Matt stared at her like she was making it up. Then his eyes flicked to the hallway where HR lived, where the corkboard hung. And just for a moment, the smirk slipped. Not off, not gone, but cracked. The door slammed harder than usual. Every conversation in finance stopped mid-sentence like someone had hit mute. And then, heels. Sharp, fast, deliberate. Cutting across the tile like a warning shot. Marcy, Our CFO didn't do drama. She was calm, tactical, surgically precise. But when she walked in that day, phone still clutched in her hand, her mouth drawn in a line that looked like it had been chiseled there, you could feel the temperature in the room drop by 10 degrees. She didn't say hello, didn't nod at anyone, just stood at the center of the floor and scanned the room like she was looking for a fire alarm nobody pulled. Matt, for once, didn't speak first. She raised the phone and clicked it off speaker, her thumb shaking slightly as she ended the call. Her voice was low, even, but there was a coldness to it that froze everyone where they sat. "Where's your cash controller?" Matt blinked like he didn't understand the words. "Sorry, who?" She didn't move. "Emily, where is she?" Matt let out a short laugh, all nerves. "Oh, her. Yeah. Think she took a personal day or something? HR flagged some culture issue. Probably didn't like the feedback. You know how some people get when—" "Stop talking," Marcy said. The room went still. She turned her head slowly, eyes falling to the corkboard outside HR. From her position, it was just barely visible. The edge of the photo. The words, "needs a lesson," still scrawled in red. Marcy stepped forward. 1 step, 2, she pointed. "That. What exactly did you tell HR to do?" Matt's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "I mean, nothing serious, just a joke. I told them to give her a little push, like culturally, get her to collaborate more. She's kind of a lone wolf, you know, old school." Marcy turned back toward him so fast he actually flinched. "She walked out." Matt swallowed. "Okay, but she walked out and in doing so took our cash controls with her. Do you understand what that means?" "She's not the only one who can move money," he protested. "No?" Marcy replied. "She was the only one who legally could." People started standing now. Finance leads, treasury analysts, legal. One of them whispered. "We tried to force a proxy approval on the primary vendor queue. The system bounced it, said the credential hash was invalid." Marcy nodded slowly, like it confirmed what she already knew. "She wrote the hash logic," she said. "She wrote the entire policy framework. She was the reason this company passed its Series B audit. She was the one who built our custodial lock system after Coastal flagged us for distributed risk. You don't replace someone like that with a memo." Matt was sweating now, actually sweating. "Okay, but can't we just get her back? I mean, she didn't give notice, right? That's a breach." "Do you know what Coastal Bank just said to me?" Marcy snapped. "They said we violated our own internal disbursement policy, that our outbound liquidity was compromised, that our vendor chain is frozen until a credentialed custodian revalidates the float." Matt opened his mouth again. Marcy cut him off. "No, don't talk." She turned to legal. "Start pulling the policy documents, every section she touched. Back to Treasury. Get me a full readout of the disbursement chain and freeze anything not pre-cleared." Then back to Matt. She stepped in close. Too close. And when she spoke this time, her voice was just loud enough for everyone to hear. "You put her on a wall like a joke. You mocked the one person in this building who knew where the wires were buried. And now you're standing in the middle of a building that doesn't know how to pay its bills." She let that sit. No one moved. No one breathed. Matt looked around like someone would rescue him. No one did. Marcy's final words were quiet. "Start over. Tell me exactly what you told HR to do." And for the first time since he'd arrived at the company, Matt didn't have a single thing to say. It started small, like a single thread unraveling in a tightly knit sweater. Just after 2 p.m., a vendor called. One of the international ones. Big, loud, no patience for excuses. Their wire hadn't landed. The payment confirmation was missing. "You said funds would arrive by end of day. It's already midnight here." The AP lead tried to stall, offered a tracking number, but the truth was there was no wire. It had never been sent. The system never triggered. By 2:17, another vendor was on the line, then another, then payroll. "We're seeing a critical mismatch," the controller muttered, pale as a sheet. "The payroll sweep didn't run." "Didn't run or didn't complete?" someone asked. "Didn't run," she repeated. "The automation flag was bypassed. It's hard-coded for custodian sign-off. It's in read-only lock mode." Finance huddled like a crime scene unit around the Treasury interface, watching red flags bloom across the dashboard. The float was intact, but inaccessible. The wires were queued, but inert. The reserve reports were locked in draft status, awaiting a credential that no longer responded. And still, Matt stood behind the group with that wounded, "this is overblown" look like someone had canceled his fantasy football draft. Marcy didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She pulled up the internal policy binder, section 12.3b. Authorized disbursement officer. ADO credentials shall not be delegated, proxied, or reassigned without dual-party transition and compliance sign-off. Her voice cut cleanly through the panic. She's the ADO, the only one. But surely, Matt started. Marcy spun around. Surely what, Matt? That we can just wave a wand and reroute Treasury access because your ego couldn't handle being corrected in a meeting? Matt opened his mouth, closed it. Her credential wasn't just a login, she continued. It was the linchpin of the system. Every vendor push, every Treasury transfer, every reserve release passed through her authorization framework. You think that just disappears because HR sent her a calendar invite labeled feedback session? Legal was scrambling now, pulling PDFs, cross-referencing compliance templates. The CTO wandered in, confused, holding a phone like it was a bomb. We just got a call from Sequoia's associate counsel. They asked why a $2.2 million Series C wire bounced from our outbound queue. Marcy didn't even blink. Tell them the truth, she said. Our disbursement custodian walked because our VP of People stapled her photo to a corkboard like a threat. The CTO blinked. Is this a PR problem? It's a liquidity problem, Marcy snapped. And if we don't fix it in the next 12 hours, it becomes a default problem. Back in AP, someone gasped. Vendor 6 just emailed a litigation intent letter. They say failure to deliver within the agreed window triggers a 3% penalty on contract. Matt actually leaned on a desk for support now, his voice small. Can't we just restore her credential somehow? No, the head of compliance muttered. Credential was tied to a biometric token. She revoked real-time access. Legally, we can't spoof it without triggering an internal fraud flag. We'd be liable for every transaction afterward. And even if we could, the controller added, she's the only one who knows how the approval flow actually works. She coded it herself. The framework's not public. Finance stared at the screen, red boxes, frozen transfers, a blinking alert, custodian authorization required. Marcy exhaled through her nose, then looked at Matt. You understand now? His voice was barely audible. I didn't know it would spiral. No, she said. You didn't care to ask what she did. From the outside, the company still looked fine. Sleek website, funded, great PR, but inside, the arteries were clogged. Blood wasn't flowing, and everyone was starting to realize something chilling. Without Emily, they didn't know how to move their own money, and the engine was already seizing. By 3:40 p.m., the war room had shifted from panic to something worse, recognition. Marcy stood alone at the whiteboard, her sleeves rolled up, markers smudged on her wrist. Every single process, every wire path, ledger control, float recalibration, internal reserve clearance was now outlined in black and blue ink, traced back to one name over and over again. Emily Tran. Her signature showed up everywhere but never loudly, always in the metadata, always beneath the surface, like a watermark only visible when the light hit just right. Vendor 3 required her dual approval token. Payroll, her routing logic. Treasury float recon, built on a timing structure only she understood, one that synced across systems nobody had thought to document. The pattern was surgical, not vengeful, not malicious, just meticulous. She hadn't sabotaged anything. She had simply walked away from the thing only she knew how to operate. Marcy had already tried twice to call her, once on her cell, once on Signal, just in case. No answer, no red receipt, no reply. It wasn't a game, it was a message. Matt stood at the edge of the room, slumped like someone waiting for a verdict. His arms were crossed, but not in confidence, in self-protection. He was no longer defending himself, just bracing. Marcy didn't look at him when she said, "The float's aging out in 7 hours. If we don't reconcile and trigger the ledger cert, we'll be flagged as non-compliant with every single partner bank." Someone from legal spoke softly. "Is that reversible?" Marcy shook her head. "Technically, yes. Operationally, no. The ledger wasn't just coded by her, it was written into our policy. She had final sign-off on disbursement logic. Every daily cert file had her fingerprint. You can't fake that. The banks won't accept a substitute." A pause. Then Matt mumbled it. Quiet, almost involuntary. It was just a joke. The room fell even more silent than before. Marcy turned slowly, looking at him like he was a cracked floor tile she'd just noticed for the first time. "A joke," she said flatly. He nodded. I didn't think she was so quiet. I didn't know she was central. Marcy blinked once. No one's central until they're gone. Another beat passed. Then she turned back to the board and circled a section labeled Custodial Override Pathway, unlinked. She decoupled the fallback route, she said, almost to herself. Months ago, after the Sequoia audit flagged redundant approvals as a risk vector, she rewrote the entire fallback schema. I signed off on it. I didn't even think about what it meant if she left. The junior controller whispered, "Was it on purpose?" Marcy answered without hesitation. No, it was just good policy. We got lean, we centralized. She became the structure. We didn't build around her, we built on her. Matt exhaled. So what do we do? Marcy finally looked at him again. You start writing a statement, she said, explaining to the board why payroll's late, vendors are threatening litigation, and investor wires are bouncing. I didn't mean for this, he muttered. No one ever means for failure, Marcy said quietly, but it finds you anyway. Especially when you fire the person holding up the ceiling because you thought she was in the way. Someone from HR peeked in, face pale. Board wants to schedule an emergency call. They're asking if Treasury has stabilized. Marcy didn't answer. She just looked down at her phone one more time. Still no reply. No missed call. No typing bubbles. Just the name. Emily. And beneath it, the call log from earlier. Today, 2:31 p.m. No answer. She stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down, and kept working. It was 11:24 p.m. when the message came through. Simple, direct, no subject line, no small talk, just one sentence typed with the unmistakable precision of someone who had spent the last 10 hours watching a building unravel from the inside. Come back, write your terms, I'll sign. Marcy. I stared at it for a moment, the soft glow of the screen lighting up my apartment like a stage spotlight. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. There was no playlist blaring, no champagne chilling in the fridge. Just the rhythmic click of my old wall clock and the hum of the laptop fan. I'd already known this was coming. They always think the system runs itself, until it doesn't. I typed exactly 13 words in response. Reinstated under named custodian retainer, contracted, not employed. Triple current comp, net 90, no emojis, no pleasantries, no follow-up, and 30 seconds later, a single PDF came back. Signed. Not by legal, not by HR, by Marcy herself. DocuSign timestamp, 11:26 p.m. CFO override authorization. Emergency contract ratification. She hadn't even hesitated, because she couldn't afford to. Inside that office, a dozen terrified VPs were likely scrambling through compliance manuals, trying to find a workaround to a system they never bothered to understand. Matt was probably still in that glass conference room, surrounded by whiteboards filled with acronyms he'd once mocked. And me? I was sitting at my kitchen table in sweatpants, sipping stale coffee, legally holding the strings to the company's entire financial bloodstream. I didn't even ask to be reinstated. This wasn't a return. It was a rewrite. They didn't get Emily the employee anymore, the name they could staple to a corkboard and laugh about in closed-door meetings. They got Emily the retained custodian, Emily the vendor, Emily the contractual necessity. No more birthday parties, no more check-ins, no more Matt. I opened the Treasury portal from my encrypted drive and reactivated the custodial credential. Everything came back online instantly. Float clearance, vendor push, payroll pre-cert. No one said thank you, no one had to, because the lesson had landed. At 12:02 a.m., I received one final Slack message from Marcy. Confirmed, cleared, thank you. That was it. By the time the office filled up in the morning, the system would be humming again. Payroll would post, vendors would receive their wires, Sequoia would stop asking questions, and I would be gone. Not invisible, just unreachable. On paper, I was still there, listed as the named custodian in every disbursement file, every ledger, every compliance review, but I never set foot in that building again. Not once. I didn't need to, because from that point forward, I wasn't part of the machine. I was the person who wrote the manual and leased them the key. It was nearly a month later when the binder turned up. Some poor junior associate, fresh out of undergrad, still trying to make a name for himself, had been assigned cleanup duty after a week of frantic policy rewrites. The order had come from legal: audit every process Emily Tran ever touched, document the gaps, and figure out how the hell to prevent another collapse without triggering another compliance nightmare. He was elbow deep in old onboarding packets and dusty infrastructure maps when he found it wedged between two procurement manuals in the bottom of a filing cabinet no one had touched in years. Thick, matte black, no branding, just a single white label across the spine. Key person dependencies. Treasury, the lock was cheap. Standard 3-digit dial. But taped beneath it was a post-it in narrow, no-nonsense handwriting. Code 314. The kid opened it like he was defusing a bomb. Inside, the binder wasn't full of charts or flow diagrams, just a few sparse pages. No fluff, no filler. And on the very first sheet, dead center in 14-point font. Disbursement authority is non-transferable without original named custodian credential. No exceptions. No asterisks. No fallback clause. The paper was signed by 3 people, the CFO, the head of compliance, and me. He stared at it for a long time, then quietly closed the binder and carried it to Marcy's office. She didn't look surprised when she saw it, just nodded once and said, "Put it on the shelf behind me." By then, the dust had mostly settled. Payroll had resumed, vendors were back on track. The Sequoia rep had stopped calling. The investors got their quarterly update with a carefully worded paragraph about updated internal protocols to reflect evolving operational dependencies. No one said my name, they didn't have to. Everyone who mattered knew. Matt? He was still there technically, but the glass office he used to occupy had been moved 2 doors down. His calendar was full of things like team culture deep dive and bias in org structure. No more access to finance meetings. No more budgetary approvals. He spoke less, smiled even less. Word around the office was he'd been reassigned to strategic support initiatives, which was corporate speak for stay in the corner and don't break anything else. HR's wall, completely bare now. The corkboard removed, new paint slapped on the drywall. Like nothing had ever happened there. But above the coffee machine, on the wall just outside the break room, someone quietly taped up a photocopy. My photo. The same one Matt had tacked up. Still grainy, still black and white, still slightly off-center. The words, "needs a lesson," had been carefully crossed out. And underneath in Sharpie, someone had written, "Lesson delivered." No one knew who posted it. Nobody touched it. But every time someone stood in line waiting for their latte, they saw it. And they remembered. Not the fallout. Not the panic, not even the silence that followed. They remembered the quiet woman who never raised her voice, never made a scene, and still brought an entire system to its knees just by walking away. I never asked for revenge. But I got something better. I became a ghost with a signature and a rate they'll never forget.